Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and the other day when I did my video on 20 to 30 pounds of muscle gain, if you guys haven't seen that, refer back to that video please, so that you guys understand what I'm talking about of why most people, actually pretty much everyone, drug-free other than the two exceptions I named specifically in that video, 20 to 30 pounds of actual true muscle gain is going to be all anyone is going to gain for their entire lifetime of training. People who maybe aren't as genetically gifted or aren't training as hard being down near the 20 in, and the slightly more gifted and combined with a harder training ethic are probably going to be closer to 30 in. And again, that's assuming you're starting at a normal healthy weight. So because of that, the truth is BMI is actually pretty accurate. And I've seen a lot of doctors discuss this. I've talked with various doctors about this, even in countries where, like the UK, I've talked to a couple of doctors about this there, because I used to have an in-law who was a medical doctor there, and what he had pointed out, and he was an athlete himself, what he had pointed out over there is that the BMI seems to be accurate for non-steroid users in his experience, people who don't use drugs, and that every exception that he had known of that they had come across was someone who is an athlete who was very probably on drugs, or an athlete who had a higher body fat combined with more muscle, so it pushed them into the obesity range, or people who, when they interviewed them and said, yeah, they admitted, because again, they're not illegal there, they admitted that they were using steroids. But generally people who just lift weights really hard, they do not go into the obese BMI range. And let's look at the chart here so you guys can understand a little bit about what I'm talking about. Let's go back to our 5'9" example. Let's say that you started the 150-pound guy that we talked about. Let's say he's 150 pounds and he puts on 20 pounds of muscle. He goes up to 170. He's only barely getting into the slightly possible overweight range. He's not obese. Obese is not till you go to red on that chart. So because of that, you could say, well, he's not obese, even though he gained 20 pounds of solid muscle. And let's say you started with a guy who wasn't as lean. Let's go to the middle of the 5'9" chart. Say around 156, you put 20 on him, he's at 176, and again, you look at the chart, he's barely in the yellow. If he goes to 130, he goes up to 185. Now he's almost to the obese range. He's clearly overweight, but he's not obese. But here's the thing, if you started at that and you gained 30 pounds of muscle, most people are going to be doing some cardio, they're going to be eating better, unless he intentionally did a dirty bulk to gain fat, he's probably going to lose a little bit of fat. So if he gains 25 pounds, it'll only put him to 180. He's still back at the yellow at that point. He's not obese, he's just overweight, and or as we would call it, over muscled is actually one of the terms they use in some of the European countries who look at this. So there's a big factor to consider there. They will call it over muscled, but if he goes up in body fat, if you gain 30 pounds of muscle and you gain some body fat from the healthy range, you put on fat and a bunch of other weight, that actually is taxing to your heart and things potentially to some extent. Because you're carrying the extra weight of the muscle in addition to extra body fat over which you had normally. So there's a big deal with people who are bulking. A lot of you guys need to realize if a lot of you are bulking hard, you're actually overeating enough to be gaining fat to muscle at a 2-to-1 ratio, which is often common. Yeah, you might actually be in the obese range and truly be obese, even though you're natty and bulking up and you lift weights and you think you're healthy. You've gained quite a bit of fat. You've gained a lot of visceral fat around your organs potentially. So you're still in the obese range. The only people other than a few genetic freaks, and again, I've heard of doctors saying this, that they find that occasional rare genetic freak, but the vast majority of people who are not at a high body fat, who they find in the obese range on any of the BMI charts, the vast majority turn out to be on steroids when they're interviewed further, and it's only that really rare exception who isn't. And I can promise you the majority of you out there are not genetically built like that, with a really big bone structure and a strong predisposition for muscle gains. So this idea that BMI isn't accurate for even the vast majority of people who lift weights, it just simply isn't true. It actually is still accurate as long as you only look at the overweight range as being over muscled, which is again oftentimes what European doctors do. They don't call it overweight, they'll call it over muscled if it's from gaining muscle. But when you start drifting into the obese range, it's generally an indicator that you're on muscle building drugs of some type. You're on anabolics most of the time, at least well over 90% of the time in the doctors that I've talked to's experience. All right guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.